So here we are, 8:55 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I've decided to lay in bed all night and drinking in my robe and watching some sort of entertainment on Netflix. Why? Because this year pretty much kicked my ass. I'm going to pass out early because I like to wake up early and start 2011 off fresh. No more broken hearts, no more self-pity parties, no more depending on people and assuming that they're going to be there when I really need them, because chances are they're not going to be there. Not that I blame anyone for not wanting to be around me. I'm a complaining, self-loathing, pathetic asshole, and I mean that in a good way. Good as in I realized it, and I know that 2011 I will be a better person. Not for anyone else, just for me. I will find out who I really am and not mold myself and my personality based on the interests of those surrounding me. I don't even like football, but that's besides the point. So before I put 2010 to rest, I'd like to air it out. What happened in 2010 that made me completely lose it and go batshit crazy? To start it off, last New Year's Eve, I was in Baltimore with my ex, Andy. God, I really did a number on him. I mean, this guy actually loved me and cared about me, and I was too stupid to notice, and I had to complain and cry over another guy I dated before him. It wasn't until he finally gave up on me that I realized that I would have completely been happy with him for the rest of my life. The last time I saw him was at a diner by him, and I knew that he had met someone that finally appreciated him. I looked at him and he seemed so relieved to have finally given up on the challenge of getting me, because he finally met someone that didn't make him chase it. And I knew that I had lost him. So I ran to the bathroom and composed myself. This was back when I wouldn't cry in front of people, because crying is a sign of weakness and it just makes you look pathetic. I came back to the table and he knew that I'd been crying and he apologized. He apologized to me. Anywho, I dropped him off at his place for the last time and hugged him. I hugged and I hugged and I wouldn't let go. I waited for him to say, "Come inside," but he didn't. And that was that. Almost a year later, and I try really hard to be happy for him. And deep down, I am happy for him. And if somehow you're watching this, I'm sorry. I was just a pathetic, immature little girl, and I'm trying really hard to be happy for him and his girlfriend, since I do hear that she is a very nice person, and deep down I am happy for him. Mostly I'm just angry at myself for being so childish and ignorant. Well, after a string of incompetent blockheads and mundane first dates, I finally decided to have a girls' night out with an old friend. Loop was empty. This was back when Thursday nights were so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Except there were a few guys across the bar. At this point in my life, I typically ended dates early and retreated to my room to watch The Hills and other Airhead MTV shows that just took me away from reality. Ironic, I know. So here I was at Loop, and this guy across the bar looked like Justin Bobby from The Hills. You know, with his scruffy beard and his messy hair and his hood covering his face and his dark eyes. I mean, his hands were all tattooed up and he downed his PBRs. He was exactly what I wanted. A complete asshole who would treat me like shit, which was what I deserved at that point, which is what I thought. The complete opposite of Andy. So I bought him a drink and that was that. Next thing you know, we're moving in together and we're engaged. I was in the clouds and ignoring anything my friends were warning me about. Of course, it went downhill quickly, and after tolerating weeks of drunken abuse and being petrified, being stabbed in the middle of the night, I realized that this badass side of this person was not something that was healthy for me. While being screamed at and belittled and embarrassed as people outside watched, I carried all my things to my car and moved out. Although I could have done without all that, but it made me realize that I'm not as weak as I thought I was. I mean, most girls stick in those type of relationships because they love them and they just can't let go no matter what. But I knew I had to get out, and I did. So I was back on the market, so to speak. I wanted nothing from anyone. I wanted to be with my friends. Of course, they were all gone at this point because I ditched them for that whack job. So I focused on my job. Now, let me just say that I'm truly blessed to have my job, and my job was probably the single most greatest thing that happened to me in 2010. I mean, I'm really blessed to actually enjoy going to work in the morning and working late and working with the greatest people around me. That that was really great in 2010, and also was the birth of my best friend's little boy, Patrick. I mean, witnessing that just proved to me that life can indeed be beautiful at times. So anyways, I shut myself out from relationships, went on meaningless dates again, and just kept to myself until one night I actually had a good time with a guy. He wasn't my type at all. By that, I mean he was smart and successful. No offense to any guys I've dated that are my friends now. You don't fall into that group. I'm looking at you, Chris. So, anyways, I wasn't that into this guy, and when I met him, he was dressed in clothes that he bought from like Barney's or something, and had a short, buzzed haircut, and was just very clean shaven looking. He didn't play any instrument and didn't really follow any type of art, but I decided to give it a shot. I mean, after all, I had the upper hand because he wasn't my type, so he couldn't really hurt me by rejecting me. After a few more dates and apple picking in upstate New York, I was starting to actually open up to him. Of course, he fed me lines like how he wants me to trust him and that he'd never leave me like the other guys. So I fell for him. And I'd spend weekends in his gorgeous apartment laying on this huge patio on a hammock in the middle of Manhattan while he served me breakfast. We'd walk around the nicest streets in New York City holding hands, walking his huge Great Dane as people stared at us and smiled. I felt lucky. He was a young, handsome lawyer with the brains of someone really smart. And I realized that maybe this life is the one that I wanted after all. The one that my mom wanted for me, the one that my sister actually got, a life of luxury. Of course, there was one thing left. 2010 had been rough, and it left me completely batshit crazy. And I held on to Max like a lifesaver until he basically just floated away. I got the call on Halloween morning after I bought some costume just to knock his socks off. And he called and said it wasn't working and that I wanted too much from him. I mean, me wanting too much from him, I wrote the guidebook on how to not seem clingy to guys after my experiences in the past year. And yet, here I was being too clingy. But he was right. I was. That's because he was all I had. I mean, all my friends were gone. And anyways, of course, I was distraught over that after the breakup. So distraught that I went into a downward spiral. Let's just say I fell down a rabbit hole. But it wasn't just him, it was everything. It was losing Andy because I didn't appreciate him. It was being broken down inch by Adam. It was most of my friends abandoning me, and then it was the realization that I was the most pathetic person alive. And I lost it. I was gone. My body was just a hollow carcass, slowly deteriorating. Since November, I've been a ghost, and a bitter one at that, spending all my nights alone in bed watching TV series on Netflix. I just didn't want to try anymore. I had spent the majority of 2010 trying to impress those around me and completely forgot who I was. Tired of having the same dates with the same questions in my head and having the same stories about my pathetic string of failed relationships and what Radiohead album I was obsessing over that week. Tired of wondering if they were going to call me back and whether I should call them or whether it was even worth it. Tired of waiting for my friends to call me to ask me to hang out. Tired of waiting for my roommate to invite me to the bar so we could dance the night away like we did the previous years. I had given up on the people around me and myself most of all. I pressed pause on my life and took a breather. That breather ends tonight at midnight. Well, tomorrow morning when I wake up at 9 a.m. But I can say one thing for sure, 2011 won't even come near how awful 2010 was. So, to let out my last ounce of bitterness, here's a big fuck you to 2010 and the person that I was. And I will no longer be that person in 2011. So, I hope you guys have a great night tonight. And sorry you had to sit through this if you actually did sit through this. But I just had to let it all out. And I'm bored and I have nothing else to do. So have a good night and hope your 2010 was much better than mine, and I hope your 2011 will be great as well. Good night.